Welcome one, welcome all to the 706 podcast, where we take a look at a movie and decide as a group whether it is one of the 706 greatest movies of all time. For this week, my name's Connor. Let me introduce my co-hosts as well. Introduce yourselves, guys. How about Tony? You go first.
Well, I thank you, Connor. I am Tony.
Anthony.
This is Kirk.
Okay, glad we got all the names out there. Welcome, guys. Thank you for joining me. The movie that I offered for this week is 2009 film by the Coen brothers, A Serious Man. This is sort of a comedic, kind of dark comic take on a man's, this character of Arthur Gopnik, played by Michael Stuhlbarg, whose life kind of unravels. Everything that seemingly can go wrong does go wrong in his life. And this is sort of a take on the Job story. He's trying to figure out kind of what has he done to deserve this? Where does the suffering originate from? And a classic story kind of too about sort of Jewish identity, this classic theme of undeserved suffering sort of in the Jewish religion and also in Jewish culture. So first of all, guys, let me just ask, what are your impressions? If you had a first impression, have you seen this movie before, and what did you think?
Okay, I'll go first if you want. I've seen it once before, and I liked it then. I still like it now. There's something about this movie that I think kind of holds me back from loving it. This is a movie that is about kind of, on the surface, textually, it's about kind of the unknowability of God, kind of the randomness of the universe, the fact that life so seldom seems to make sense. The righteous are punished, the wicked thrive, but not in a consistent way where that's like a way the universe works. It seems to be seemingly random. And how do we make sense of that? How do we make a narrative out of that? Which is a very kind of timeless, universal theme. Obviously, people have been asking that question since the dawn of time. But like, I almost feel as though, and I'm sure, Connor, you'll fill us in with your own, what you bring to the movie and the things you get out of it. But to me, I almost feel like that in itself is not that. I feel like you need to bring something more to the table. I feel like the role of art is to kind of make a narrative out of it, is to kind of supply us with some kind of meaning, which I think this movie does kind of try to do. But I feel like there's something about it that's lacking for me in the way some Coen brothers movies are. However, I will say that like, this is an incredibly, amazingly directed movie, like absolutely masterful directing from the Coen brothers. The lines pop. They have that such unique rhythm to each other. There's so many just like laugh out loud comedic moments. There are moments in this movie that are like stunning in their just like comic timing and just the editing. There's something, just the character of Cy Abelman is such a timeless creation. He makes me laugh so hard whenever I see him. And then like the moment that makes me laugh, and I can't quite explain why so hard, is what's the name of the brother? His brother?
Arthur.
Arthur, yes. There's a scene where Arthur's on the beach. What?
Isn't it his cousin, or it's his brother?
Oh, wait a minute, it's his brother.
Uncle Arthur.
I'm forgetting. Sorry. Arthur is the brother. I said Arthur was our main character, Michael Stuhlbarg. Sorry. His name is Larry. My bad.
Larry Gopnik is our main character, but Arthur is brother. There's a scene where he's on the beach, and he walks up to the camera in almost like a menacing way. He looks like a creature from the Black Lagoon or something, and he says, "You could bottle this air and sell it," or something really loud. And then you hear just this menacing, like, orchestra, and it says the first rabbi on the screen. It's this moment that's so absurd, and it's just like, how do they create these moments? And just, I don't know. I don't want to go on and on, but there's a lot I love about this movie, but there are some things that kind of hold me back from going all the way with it, if that makes sense.
Sure. If I could address one thing, I think it's really hard. This is a movie that, ultimately it kind of begs you to interpret it. And ultimately it seems to say that there is no possible interpretation. That's a very hard thing to kind of get behind, easy thing to kind of sneer at. But I think what the movie does well is telling the story in a good way, or giving you sort of, its art is to entice you with certain possibilities that don't end up becoming true. So it's not just completely random, even though ultimately it is kind of seemingly meaningless or almost nihilistic in a way. But anyway, Go ahead, Anthony and Kirk. Have you guys weighed in yet? Would you like to
Well,
weigh in?
well, maybe not random, but maybe a sort of a embracement or at least a acknowledgement of the irrationality of the way things work. The sort of acceptance of paradoxical relationships actually happening
Mm-hmm.
seems to be kind of the thing, whether it's the tornado or whether it's just when he says, why do these things happen to me, I'm a good person. The whole point isn't the fact that it's good or like bad morality in play. It's the fact that it just happens, that things can come into existence in however form they do. But anyway, to answer your one thing is, like, I think I mentioned this last week, but I saw this movie first in high school, and I felt like I had to pretend in high school that it was like a really interesting and deep movie,
Sure.
and that I was talking about it, and really had to force myself to be like, this is cinema, guys.
Sure.
It's like senior year of high school or whatever it is.
Uh-huh.
But I think now is I have sort of like the lamest kind of criticism of it, I feel like, which is like, it's a movie that I'm willing to accept is, I don't know, good or great, but I think it's like, it's perfectly meant for someone that's not me. I think there's a certain type of person who could watch this movie, laugh and get it and really roll behind it. But for me, like, I have a very hard time buying the Sly Abelman scenes as humorous. Like, to me, he just comes off really irritating and grating in a way that just makes me want to fast forward the scenes at times.
Sorry, Cy Abelman does.
Sly Abelman, yeah, the wife's lover, yes. And honestly, at a certain point, it's just like when I watch Larry, there's a certain part of me that just kind of is like ready to accept this whole movie being over. As lovely as like the thing is to like watch, like in terms of like the mise en scène and everything,
Sure.
the scheme, the beats are fine, but it never hits me in a way that works. I think we talked a few weeks ago, is like Tony was saying how like certain people find Nolan cold. I think this is my problem with a lot of Coen brothers comedies, is I just, for me, it's like I don't have the warmth a lot of people find, and it just remain kind of stilted pieces for me.
Do you find it kind of mean-spirited, or
Not mean spirited.
you
I just find
don't
it.
get the humor of it?
I don't get the humor of it, and I don't find like a human connection to it.
Sure, fair enough. Okay, Kirk.
Okay, well, these are all fair critiques, I must say, and thoughts that have passed my mind. I've considered since I finished watching the movie. I haven't seen this one. I don't know. I think everybody else has. Sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a Coen Brothers movie. They have a specific style. They have a kind of a penchant for embellishment, the embellishment of the mundane. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah.
In the essence that normal, everyday, banal interactions are exemplified, are caricaturized and injected with irony to draw out certain considerations from the audience. So that's on like a micro scale, but looking at it from a broader picture, I couldn't really engage too comfortably with this movie. I mean, it was quite unnerving at times. I think it was a humbling exercise for the directors and the writer, the Coen brothers. I think a lot of their movies are almost performatively obscure and obtuse, i.e. Burn After Reading, when J.K. Simmons' character is basically like, so nobody knows anything, and so then it's like, what the fuck is the point of the movie? Is it purely like for sensory enjoyment? So I get a little frustrated, and I try to glean meaning from certain scenes, from certain interactions. This movie was a little more humbling in that it kind of straight out identified that, it kind of confronted that nebulous philosophy that they've kind of used for their advantage head on. And for me, that was almost a tacit acknowledgement to the audience that, hey, maybe we're full of shit too. And so I saw a lot of them in the movie. I think it must be there have to be some semi-autobiographical elements to it, maybe from their father. Obviously they weren't his age, Larry's age, but yeah, I don't know. I think the ending really turned me off. I thought it was needlessly grim. Kind of like, well, we're all gonna die anyways. There's a tornado coming. We're all gonna die anyways. So what does it really matter? And it kind of washed away these built up feelings of caring and consideration that I had had for the protagonist throughout the movie. I just felt a little too withdrawn, a little too tumbled around in the dryer at the end, to really kind of appreciate it, take stock, and appreciate the movie. But for me, I think Michael Stuhlbarg, I don't know if it's a German pronunciation, Stuhlbarg.
Yeah.
He's excellent. He was Ace Rothstein in Boardwalk Empire. He just is a great
Rothstein, no kidding.
What's that?
Rothstein, no kidding. Well, of course, you play kind of a nebbish, sort of Jewish character.
Yeah,
he
does have he is typecast a little bit like that. But he keeps me engaged throughout with his humanity. Is just like he exudes humanity, vulnerability, timidity.
Yeah.
But like an endearing timidity where you're rooting for him and you feel the blows that he's dealt throughout the movie. But yeah, I think TLDR, long story short, the idea being it's kind of like a critique. For me, I saw it from my lens as a critique on organized religion and the idea of people who try to prognosticate the future and who try to interpret and commercialize the past, or and that can be through various avenues, not just religion, obviously. But yeah, I'm sure I'm just taking the winding road back to where you guys are all at, in the sense that the universe is unknowable, and there's an irony there when you're a physics professor and you're standing in front of a huge intricate proof saying that, well, basically this proves that we know nothing. That was very clever. So yeah, I don't know. I had mixed feelings on the movie. I think along the lines of Anthony, but I'm glad I watched it.
Yeah, no, I think you all definitely hit on, the kind of central problem of the movie, which is, this idea that, well, if it's all kind of really about nothing, what did you really gain from watching it, right? What was kind of the point? And certainly I can't really refute that, I have to say, and that is something that's, I guess, a little bit unsatisfying about the movie. But I think what I find beautiful about it, what I find kind of meritorious about it, right, is the way in which it kind of plants these breadcrumbs. It gives you these kind of ambiguous situations that sort of stimulate your mind and ask you to kind of ponder or think. And, I get that ultimately, right, you may be conditioned to say, well, it doesn't matter anyway. But there's something about it just in the sheer humanity or the comic way in which they present these things that you really, I don't know. I mean, I think maybe your mileage may vary, as it did, I think, with Anthony, but I think just the way it's written, it really invites you, it provokes you to have a thought, to think about it, or to be bemused, or to fight back, or to say no, to say yes, to doubt. That's what I kind of like about it. But I have to kind of concede that ultimately, yes. I mean, maybe that is not quite as ambitious a thing to do, to make a movie that says that everything is nothing. But okay, just for example, let's talk about that ending, because it's a very interesting one, and I have my own reservations about it. So if you guys recall, right, basically it's Larry. Ultimately, he's essentially, there's an attempted bribery by one of his students to change a grade on his test. And ultimately he does accept it, right? He seems to accept the bribe and to change the grade of the exam. And then immediately, seemingly, two sort of consequences seem to arise from that. He gets a phone call from his doctor, ambiguously but strongly implied to be giving him news about perhaps, some kind of terminal illness or some very serious illness he may have. And at the same time, this kind of tornado appearing outside of the Hebrew school where Larry's son Danny is studying, and it ends very abruptly. We don't know kind of what happens to either of them. But what did you make of this ending? To me, it seems to almost kind of contradict a little bit what the movie had said before, but there's definitely multiple kind of interpretations. What was your feeling, or what were your thoughts when you saw that ending?
I have a couple thoughts. So one thing I really like about the ending with the phone call is that it feels very correct for the movie, that the thing that like dooms him, like we don't know that it dooms him, but for the purposes of the movie, that's how it ends. So we assume that it implies that's like his doom, is the thing that happened at the beginning of the movie we haven't even thought about. So there's all this chaos going on around him. There's all these dramas. There's all these storylines that are all resolved or not resolved in one way or another, often through the use of anticlimax. And then this thing you've totally forgotten about is what gets him. That feels very like correct for the movie and very Coen Brothers, and also very real. Like that's how I imagine when I get all melancholy or think about my own doom. That's kind of how I assume it'll go.
Thing that you've forgotten about will doom you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's not what I'm worried about. It's some random other thing I haven't thought about in years. So there's that. But the other thing the thing about it that does seem, and I think you alluded to this, Connor, by saying it maybe undermines the point, is it is very strongly implied that it is karma in some way. Because it's like almost like as he does the minus on the C minus, you hear the phone ring. It's almost like an immediate like consequence, as you said. It's very strongly implied to be a consequence, which is like, okay, so this is like a moral punishment of it for his moral failing, but why then would that matter? Isn't the whole message of the movie kind of that like the universe doesn't work that way? Is this just how he's conceiving it? Or is it maybe, I don't know. So I don't know what to make of that aspect of it.
There's like a weird sort of almost like Protestant sense though of like where the good doesn't matter, but the bad itself does.
Sure.
And the bad is what gets the consequence, because it's not just the father, it's the son. The son like went through like his ceremony completely high, and then he ends it by having his radio back and he puts the headphone in. Yeah, and so it's the sense of like completely neglecting the culture, or at least the instruction of Hebrew, which is itself, as we know, is sort of constructed language. It's not actually authentic to traditional spoken written forms of it that it was hundreds of years ago, but it's been resurrected, which is kind of a fascinating thing to think about if you want to take it literally on a cultural sense. But it's also like the sun. So is it like a collective karma happening too, to the whole town?
Kirk, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with Tony. I agree that the nuance, the ambiguity of it all, the mimetic essence is lost in the last 2 to 3 minutes for me, in favor of conveying some sort of cosmic consequence. I don't know. It could also be interpreted as like a test of how you've responded to the movie thus far, or your own personal understanding of the universe. Like, is this relatable? Is this, for someone who, maybe for a Hasidic Jew watching the movie, they're like, well, he got his comeuppance, maybe for an evangelical or for a Mennonite, I don't know, there could be different reactions. We all kind of have fairly similar. We're all in the same
The
ballpark.
Mennonites love this movie.
I know that was a bit of a
On my Mennonite film podcast, we did this movie the first week.
okay, but yeah, they might be distracted by the other elements of film rather than the moral teachings. But yeah, I think there might be some sort of cultural provocation going on. And that might be how it ties into the opening scene, where we have religion is kind of put up against God, or is compared to, is seen as an analog to gossip, superstition, and hearsay. I don't know how to describe specifically what was going on in the beginning. It's obvious that presuppositions, kind of the idea of presuppositions and a fixed worldview, can be comforting internally, but can obscure the truth. Maybe, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
so
can be unsatisfying, right?
Or unsatisfying, yeah.
Yeah, because of the contradictions that are inherent in daily life and what you tend to see, right? I mean, it's kind of as Larry, he'll learn one thing from one speaker, one character, and he'll go to another person and they look at him like he's crazy, right? Like, I've learned I need to help people, right? And the lawyer's just like, oh, okay, Larry, that's great. I just think there's something, again, it's this feeling of being lost and the contradiction and the sort of the overwhelming quality of life, I think is very, very eloquent. But yeah, as to the ending, I mean, honestly, I don't know what to say to you guys. I think if anything, right, it has to be what Anthony is saying, right? That you don't get credit for good deeds. You only are punished for bad deeds. That seems to be what the movie is kind of saying, which is kind of crazy, right? Obviously, it doesn't ultimately come down and say that anyone is punished, right, for what Larry did. But and also there's the other aspect of it, which I do like about it, is the appearance of the whirlwind, which of course, kind of calls back to the story of Job. And I hate to kind of bring out the sort of just the literary references or what have you. But the story of Job, where ultimately God appears in the whirlwind, and there's something about, ultimately, we've had all these rabbis who are supposed to give this wisdom, but ultimately the wisdom, or whatever it is, resides in nature, or in this thing that only can come from God, right? Something kind of beyond the human that can't quite be grasped or explained, right? And I think there's something there about that, but but I guess if you do take it literally, it seems to imply that there is this negative karma as opposed to positive karma. But yeah, and there's other moments, throughout the film. I think there's little, again, these kind of touches of encouraging you to read it in a sort of biblical way. These sort of half encouragements to see this kind of sublime truth, or to you're on the verge of uncovering this grand truth. Like the Mentaculus of his brother, right, which is this notebook full of, it's a probabilistic map of the universe. Or when you have moments like when he's on his roof, and he's kind of getting signals from the heavens, so to speak, or he's getting a signal from the TV, and then also he sees his neighbor, Mrs. Samsky, which is this kind of version of the story of King David and Bathsheba, where King David sees Bathsheba bathing from the roof of his palace or whatever. So there's all these kind of weird, and I get that it's not satisfying. These are mere kind of name drops, or mere references, mere allusions to things that may not amount to much. But I love that it encourages you. It's sort of, it entices you to try to figure it out. It makes you want to ask the question so very desperately. And there's nothing else in this movie. I mean, okay, shout out to Fred Melamed, who is one of my favorite aspects of this movie, who plays Cy Abelman. But my absolute favorite part of this movie is the Goy's Teeth sort of episode, which is this crazy parable told by a rabbi about how a dentist discovers a sort of Hebrew inscription in the mouth of one of his patients who's non-Jewish, saying, "Help me, save me." And it's a sort of struggle to reckon with what that is. And I just love it. And also this amazing Jimi Hendrix, the machine gun. Machine gun, as it builds, and it's just this amazing piece of work, this piece of cinematics of suspense, and encouraging you to try to grasp what's happening, with the ultimate conclusion that, well, we don't know, we have no idea what's going on, but helping others couldn't hurt, right? This ultimately unsatisfying thing, because you don't want an answer in the end, do you, right? An answer isn't satisfying. The question is. But yeah, Tony.
Well, no, it's funny you say that, because it reminds me of, I think, one of the lines the rabbi said, or no, Michael Stuhlbarg says to the rabbi, why does he give us these questions if he's not going to give us the answers? It's very, very meta. It's like, why do they want to provoke us in this way? Why do they want to tease us in this way if they're not interested in the ansers? Yeah, and thinking about it a little more, I'm coming around on some of these elements, and I think that one of the flaws, I guess, of this man, it's not anything he necessarily does or doesn't do, although the movie would certainly say that at the end he makes a bad moral choice. Is his desperation in the search is where he kind of goes wrong, because he goes to these other people in the hopes that they will save him. These rabbis, he thinks, like, if they can just tell him the right words in the right order, if it gives them an explanation that will make sense, he will be happy. He will be fulfilled. His life will kind of have some sense of order and continuity and like structure and logic. But the reality is, like, there's nothing they can say to him. And I kind of like that, because it's almost like, to me, like, part of the purpose of cinema is to express ideas that you couldn't express just through words. Yeah. Because if you could just express it through words, then you should just use words. Why would you, any art form, you should use that art form, right? So part of the idea, I think, is that there are no words to give you the meaning of life. There are no words that'll make this make sense. It's just about, like, finding a way to live in that moment and find grace and beauty in your own life. And as trite as that sounds, that's kind of the point, because there is no. And
helping others couldn't hurt. It's true, right? Helping others couldn't hurt, could it? But it's just so unsatisfying when faced with a question. But
and at the end of the bar mitzvah, when the son finally talks to the one rabbi that, like, he was trying to talk, the dad was trying to talk to the whole time, they just end up quoting Jefferson Airplane lyrics at each other. It's
right. And the truth is found to be lies, and all hope within you dies. He doesn't say, then what, he says. So seemingly implying, right, find someone to love, right?
Yeah.
You got to find somebody to love, right? So, but how satisfying is that, right? Something that doesn't really come up anywhere else in the movie. Doesn't seem that.
Well, the
finding
fact that
someone to love is such a simple thing, right?
Yeah. I think the idea there, and I like it, I can jive with it, is that often the wisest among us have the simplest ideas and are the most unassuming. I don't know. It's obviously a tried and true idea and concept that's permeated movies, I guess, a trope or something. But for me, where was there he was talking about when he's meeting with the second rabbi, he's talking about a toothache and, like, this existential dread. It will pass, and we see it pass. For me, the turning point for him is when he's comforting his brother in the empty pool.
Sure.
And he's seeing the vulnerability and the suffering of his brother, and he's realizing that empathy and universality are two avenues out of these feelings of isolation, of selective torment, and he's really connecting with that, and then and comforting him, helping others.
Yeah.
So there is truth in what these rabbis are saying, if it's a little bit cliched, of course. And then also, we see him at the bar mitzvah. He seems quite happy, quite proud. It's almost the idea of, like, it's an unsettling idea, but that we have these social controls in place to allow us not to have to think about the existential dread the indelible facts of life that we're all going to die. We don't know what we're doing here. And, you know, so it kind of, for me, that there were pangs of that, like, yeah, there are moments, there are parties, there are celebrations, there are accomplishments, but in the end, are they all really just in order, you know, do they serve to distract us from the chaos, the entropic madness that lies underneath? It's almost like, no, that's a reach, but there are tinges of like Lovecraftian.
There's noise coming from your mic. It's driving me nuts.
Sorry.
I don't know what you're doing. It's.
He's underwater.
Yeah, I'm underwater.
Go ahead. Continue.
No, I was just saying, there are like tinges of like
Lovecraft.
Well, yeah, I don't know. You know, that's maybe I'm stupid. Maybe I am just
No,
like
Kirk,
a
you
math
figured
idiot.
it out. That's the
But
right
like,
answer.
I will say, when
Yeah,
Michael
that-
Spielberg said the name of his cat, I was very shocked.
the idea that he comes closer and closer to the truth, yet closer, or perceived truth, and closer to madness, you know, further from sanity, is a common trope in that genre. But of course, that transcends just genre fiction. So, anyways, I don't know.
No,
Yeah,
sorry, Connor. I didn't want to.
No, Tony, go ahead. I was just going to wrap up.
I'm glad you mentioned the bar mitzvah scene, because I thought that actually helped start to make some of this stuff click, because that is a moment where he does seem like very genuinely happy. Like, it's not like it's his purest moment of joy in the movie, and he's holding his wife's hand, and it's like in that moment he doesn't care about what's going on with his wife. He doesn't care about Cy Abelman. He doesn't care about although I guess he gets brought up again, so maybe that it's a little tainted, I guess. Take it back. No,
but Cy loved you, right? He respected you so much, or something.
He wrote the letters.
For tenure, yeah.
But even so, like, it doesn't seem to bother him. Like, we don't get a shot of him like troubled by it. He's just in that moment, you know, which I guess underscores the point. But perhaps my favorites. All right, Anthony, I'm sorry. Can I tell you one more scene that ties into it real quick?
Of course, yeah.
Earlier in the movie, the first rabbi he sees, played by Bing Bong, he looks out the window.
Big Bang Theory's Sheldon.
Yes.
Not
Sheldon.
No, I was kidding. It's the other. It's his friend.
Ancillary.
Sorry. I'm wrong.
Wolowitz.
But he keeps saying, and it's a hilarious line. He keeps talking about this parking lot, like moments of joy, like the parking lot. And he keeps. It's so funny because it's this really banal thing. And it's like, why is he so fixated on the parking
Pure
lot?
emptiness. Yeah.
But the reality is, that guy did find beauty in that parking lot, because he clearly means what he's saying. So as silly as it might look, it's impossible to convey with words, there is some kind of beauty in that parking lot. And I think what they want us to do is to try and find it. And he did find it at the end of the movie.
I think there's like a more thing of like he's just reaching and he comes to the parking lot as kind of this thing. The fact is, like, the guy, the rabbi's also stuck in routine. And all he sees is that parking lot like every day, so he has to turn it into something for this guy.
Let's not forget he's a junior rabbi. So to me, it reeks of an inexperienced, nervous, overwhelmed professional who's looking around. You know, when you're trying to make up a fake name, and you see, you know, you try to make up a name or a story, and you see a Coke bottle, and you know.
His name is Cup Tableson.
Yeah, exactly. Like he landed on this horrible metaphor, but he has to commit to it.
Yeah.
And to me, that's just pure comedy. That was the funniest scene in the movie for me, actually. But I think the point is that we're all drawing different things from these different scenes, and that's what I think they would be happiest about. So I don't know.
Yeah, like, final thing too is like the bar mitzvah thing is I had a totally different one. Ray was thinking about that, which is like, I think he's happy, but he's happy because people are actually recognizing him for like the first time throughout the whole movie in a sort of positive way. That they don't understand that the son is actually kind of completely undermined the cultural tradition of the ritual by being high and like not even like engaging with it. But we don't even see the scene where he's reading from it. So it sounds like, you know, like we're led to believe that, oh my God, this guy who was high, like, just delivered this beautiful rapture of the Torah. And at the other time too, is like these other people who are coming in who up until that point have basically kind of acknowledged him as something less than like a full individual work person are finally giving him some sort of respect in the religious side of community.
Sure, and that's when seemingly he commits his sin, right?
Yeah.
And apparently takes the bribe. But anyway, yeah, guys, I mean, thank you very much for all your thoughts. I wish we could talk further. I hate to cut this short because you guys have many interesting thoughts that I had not lighted upon myself. I guess I just conclude that it's a very rich movie in the way it makes us think about these things and the incongruities that are part of the comedy of it. Right? I don't know, encourages us to kind of, feel the question, I guess, is kind of the point, or maybe if there is a point, But let's get the votes, guys. Is it one of the 706 greatest movies of all time?
I'll go first in just saying briefly that, yeah, I'm not the biggest Coen Brothers fan, but this movie, there was an aspect to reiterate of like humility and raw humanity and vulnerability that I could relate to. And the acting really pulled through for me. And it'll be a movie that, I would describe it as less than the sum of its parts. And yet I found it to be enjoyable overall. Like the moment to moment, the temporal enjoyment was enough to allow me to grant a yes for this movie. So yeah.
That was the most like Project Runway, like back and forth thing I've ever heard in my life.
That would be on a Tumblr and like 4 screen captures.
You know what? I've kind of had, similar to Kirk, in talking about it, I've kind of grown to appreciate it more. I left kind of feeling lukewarm on it, but I really do think there's a lot of cool stuff in this movie. And I think we didn't talk enough about the craft, but I think the filmmaking craft in this movie is just so undeniable. Just the images they create, just the people they cast, those like the cuts to just these actors who just look like that's not easy to do. No. Like that's really, really hard. And they have this incredible like wizardry. There are moments this movie where like, how did they make this happen? So for that and for everything else we said, I'll go yes.
Cool.
Well, there's 2, but I would have said no because one, Kirk's laughing, but it's like one is I've realized over the last like 35 minutes, this is much more interesting to talk about and theorize about and pull in every single different direction, but in a way that is actually more alive on its own than in actually even going back to the movie in it of itself. And for the discourse itself is more fascinating. It's like there's great acting. It's a lovely looking movie.
Where does the discourse come from but the movie, right?
This is sort of like a Emperor's Clothes situation,
okay,
right?
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's just I like
us clothes, dude. What do you mean? They were great.
I realize I enjoyed Kirk's commentary and discussion honestly more than what the movie itself I think is really fully hinting at.
Thank you, Anthony.
Sure.
And I think if I were to go back to it, I wouldn't actually find new things to uncover for myself. I would only come back to what Kirk, Tony, and you were talking about.
What other people think, not what you personally can extract from the movie. Yeah.
Your last comment, Anthony, reminds me of when I saw Zadie Smith talk, and she said that like she has this book of like essays on the movie Stalker, and she loves it. She thinks it's super interesting, but she cannot watch that movie to like save her life. And that's kind of what that reminded me of. So I think you're speaking to a real thing that people can feel. So,
Sure. Well, okay. Well, so Anthony's official vote, dissenting opinion, so 2 yeses. So it makes it into the 706. Wow.
Call him Brett Kavanaugh.
Yeah. Hey, you took my joke.
All right. Well.
So thank you guys. I was really happy to watch with you. This is definitely a favorite movie of mine. Now let's go and let's have you guys suggest your movies to watch for next week, and I get to choose which one I want to watch.
Anthony's choice. He's gone least recent, so
Sure, you're right. Good point.
All right, I'm debating between 2, so I'm going to go last.
Okay. Anthony goes last. The prudent move.
Tony, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. My pick would be Martin Scorsese's The Age of Innocence, starring Daniel Day-Lewis. beautiful period drama set in 19th century New York. Amazing acting, amazing script. Fairly not really what we think of when we think of Martin Scorsese, but really beautiful movie.
Okay.
Kirk, yeah.
I'm gonna go for this one. It's a little tenuous in that I don't know if you all have seen it, and two, I'm sure there might be some kind of compulsory visceral reaction to it. So First Man. You could ho-hum it and say it's too mainstream, it's whatever, but let's remember this is a Damien Chazelle film. He is one of the best directors on the scene these days. Ryan Gosling stars Neil Armstrong. It's basically it details the Apollo 11, right? Not Apollo, yeah, Apollo 11. The whole gradual workings up to finally landing on the moon. It's a great singular look at one man's journey while he's being pulled in a million directions, and how he kind of reconciles being seen as a symbol, or how he's being manipulated or used, and his devotion to his craft and his family. And so it's there's a lot of meat on the bones here for me. And also it's just an extremely aesthetically pleasing and thrilling movie, a la Gravity, but with actual story. So I really enjoyed it. I think it's criminally underrated. And if you haven't seen it, I don't know if you've seen it, Connor. Maybe you have. And
Not seen it.
Blase. You have?
Have not.
Oh, okay. Well, it's something to consider. 2018. It didn't really get much Oscar buzz, but it was pretty good. Claire Foy's also in it. The Queen, of course. Kyle Chandler. Some other dudes. Shea Wiggum, one of my favorites. Anyways, on to Anthony.
Shea Wiggs.
I remember one, I like Gravity, Kirk, but I remember a full 6 months of sticking up, at the bat for Damien Chazelle and La La Land against this guy over here, Tony. So
I like La La Land. The same way as you.
I just remember him making fun of me all night for liking that movie, knocking on the door, beating me down, and anyway. All right. One, so this movie's on HBO Max, since Tony last week knocked me some points for thinking my movie was unavailable. But I'm going to continue the Tony trend and do a movie that's kind of lesser recognized from a big figure. I'm going to do a Charlie Chaplin movie. It's a dark comedy from 1947 that's nothing like you would think Charlie Chaplin would do. It's basically a disaster for his image, for the box office, in his life. It's a dark comedy in which he stars as this guy who was fired from his banking job and realizes he has to figure out a way to finance his family. So what he decides to do is become a bigamist, where he'll marry these wealthy women and murder them for their money. That's basically the plot line, and that's where the movie kicks off.
All right. Well, I'm very intrigued. That was a good choice.
It's called Monsieur Verdoux for Kirk.
Monsieur Verdoux. Okay, cool. So guys, this is tough. I definitely have two. I'm leaning towards. I'm torn between. I won't say which ones, but
wait. We have
give
to
your rebuttals.
Yeah.
And please push me in one direction or the other. Use all of your powers of eloquence to convince me.
Okay, Kirk. If I wanted to watch the Adam Sandler comedy where he has to be the best man at his friend's wedding, Worst Man, I would watch that on HBO Max. And if I wanted to watch Monsieur P.U., I'd watch the Looney Tunes. So my movie's got Daniel Day-Lewis.
Started strong, Tony.
It's a very I don't know. I basically said it. It's a movie about desire, and it's a very romantic movie, and it's a very sad movie, and it's just really hits all the right buttons for me, and it's got a fantastic ending. That's my pitch for that movie. Whatever I picked.
Yeah, I will say, in my defense, in the movie I selected, its defense I've nominated. It is along the lines of Collateral, really a genre exercise, as Tony eloquently stated last week, in the sense that it is all about the craft. It is all about the cohesion, the pacing, everything, the ineffable qualities at times that really make this stand out among the detritus that is mainstream cinema. I don't know, at times. And, I'm thinking about movies like Space Cowboys or Gravity. I hated Gravity, but I love this movie. So this movie had something Gravity didn't for me. So, and then, yeah, I don't know what else to say about the other two. They're, admirable selections. But, just having my dog die like 30 minutes before we started, it's been really rough. And kind of looking for something to like hold on to for the next week, so
I'm sorry, Kirk, I didn't
I
realize.
thought you were serious. I was like, Jesus Christ, Kirk.
Yeah.
When we started, you looked really, really down. Like, so I was like, is that true? So, yeah.
I had 2 dogs die and a cat. So
All right.
no, I love how Kirk just picked up Gravity as a straw man and just beat it down. Beat it
That
down
was kind of a
further.
cheap shot, Kirk.
I haven't seen it myself, but
All right. Well, I'm sort of fascinated by First Man, if only because it's like one of those movies that like was so primed and then it completely dropped off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
When it came around for like award talk, I guess, and like I don't know anyone who's seen it other than Kirk now.
I've seen it.
Oh, you have? Okay. Well, the Age of Innocence, I actually love that movie. I actually, Tony is trying to expand a paper this summer in regards to adaptation studies for a project. So I'd love to rewatch it. So I can't say anything bad about that other than I will watch it on my own at some point soon. But Mon Ado. This is a fantastic film. It's a classic film. Brilliant. Kirk would like it. I actually don't know. It's a good pick.
yeah, these are all really good picks. Originally, I was torn between Age of Innocence and Monsieur Verdoux, but Kirk came up from behind with his defense of this movie, and Anthony's like even backing it up. And this is a really, really tough choice. This is like pulling teeth for me right now, making this decision.
Talk to the rabbi.
On the one hand, Monsieur Verdoux sounds very fascinating. I love Charlie Chaplin's late movies, like the one about the kind of Hollywood blacklist and the House Un-American Activities Committee and stuff. That stuff is really cool. Shame we haven't had Chaplin yet. That might be my next movie. My next suggestion. Kirk, I'm sorry, I cannot get over my prejudice against space movies. I guess you guys never knew this, but
We should have all nominated a space movie.
I hate space-related movies. I tried to watch the right stuff, and I fell asleep.
Wait, do you not like 2001?
That's what I was about to
A
say.
little aside.
Okay, well, of course I like 2001.
Oh,
I hate the space parts.
You like Aliens?
I have to pretend that it's not in space. I love all the parts with Hal. I just have to pretend they're on land the whole time.
They're in a submarine.
So, in sum, even though I'm being a little bit dangerous by picking Tony because he went last, he picked me last. So we're starting a kind of
This is a little circle jerk here.
circle jerk between us.
Some
I
backroom
have to go
deals.
for Age of Innocence. It's been on my list for a long time. I love my girl Edith Wharton. Big fan.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, check it out. I taught it in my English class. I've never read Age of Innocence, but I heard it's her best. And I'm fascinated by this idea of a very un-Scorsese movie set in the 19th century. I'm tantalized by the possibility I have to pick Tony.
Kirk, have you seen this movie?
No,
Good,
I have
good.
not. When did it come out?
Early 90s? I don't know when
94?
exactly.
93, apparently.
93?
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey,
I
the
have
year I was
Wikipedia.
born, so you must be good.
Wait, isn't that like Prime Goodfellas? Isn't that 93?
I have Goodfellas.
Goodfellas 92,
was
94.
91 or 90.
Okay,
This
so
is
this was one for
Goodfellas.
him, right after the one for them.
Sure.
Sure.
Gotta love those. Like
One for Kirk,
Simon.
one for Anthony. He does one for each of us.
What was the Japanese missionary movie?
Silence. Love that movie.
Silence. Yep.
But anyway, guys, okay, that's the one we're watching for next time. Age of Innocence next week, hopefully, on the 706 podcast. I hope to see you there. All of our dear co-hosts and also our fans, our diehard 706 podcast fans, please keep listening, like and subscribe, keep it coming, and
Patreon.
Buy the shirts.
yeah, and peace out, everybody. See you next time.